A memorial urn sits quietly on an altar, the final testament to a life now gone. But in the afterlife, a divine being realizes the cremation is already finished, much to the soul's horror. An angel tries to console the panicked spirit, explaining that there is no going back. She turns her fury on the old god, demanding to know how he could be so careless. He calmly raises a hand, assuring them that he will explain everything, and that while returning is impossible, reincarnation into a new world is an option. Our protagonist is stunned to learn he won't be reborn, but will instead inherit a body, and as an apology for their mistake, they will grant him a special ability to survive. The word reincarnation echoes in his mind. He reflects on his unremarkable past life, deciding that a chance to start over is a gift. He agrees to their terms, much to the old god's tearful relief. But when he asks about his special ability, the god seems to draw a blank. The angel, however, eagerly steps in, a wild look in her eyes. She starts rattling off ideas, from a durable body to language skills and even a smartphone. Suddenly, a loud chime echoes through the divine realm, stopping them all in their tracks. The old god looks annoyed, explaining that his shift is over for the day. He begins to leave, causing our protagonist to panic about his unresolved fate. The two deities just give him a casual thumbs up, saying they'll figure it out as they go. And with a simple, well then, they wave him a cheerful goodbye, leaving him to his uncertain future. Thanks to a careless god, a thoughtless angel, and their haphazard mistake, our protagonist awakens to his second life, battered and confused. He's immediately greeted by a concerned man with a thick mustache who seems to know him. The name Gaia echoes in his mind, a sudden and jarring realization. A wave of excruciating pain suddenly crashes over him, as the memories and information of this new world flood his consciousness. He realizes this must be the figure-it-out-as-you-go part the god mentioned. When the agony finally subsides, he looks up at the man caring for him. And with the new memories comes a name. Athos, his uncle. Overwhelmed with relief, his uncle pulls him into a tight, desperate hug. Athos pulls back, his face a mask of tearful relief. He explains how he feared losing Gaia, just as he'd lost the boy's parents. Gaia can only stare, the weight of this new life settling upon him. He remembers the god's words and realizes the original Gaia must have truly died. Overcome with emotion, Athos wonders if he's even worthy of raising such a beloved child. But his grief quickly turns to concern as he asks about the injuries inflicted by the Empire. Gaia looks down at his arm, noticing his wounds are healing at an impossible rate. He quickly hides the strange phenomenon from his uncle's view. A sly grin spreads across his face as he realizes this must be the durable body the angel promised. He quickly unwraps his bandages, trying to convince Athos that he's perfectly fine. But Athos explains that even though he just woke up, they have somewhere they must go. Without hesitation, Gaia agrees to follow his uncle's lead. As they walk, Gaia learns that he is the son of the Bulmunt tribe's chief, who led a rebellion against the Empire. A concerned soldier asks about Gaia's health, but Athos is focused on getting an audience with the Emperor. He intends for them both to apologize for their tribe's recent actions. Gaia understands they must humble themselves before the Empire, a bitter pill to swallow. They approach the grand tent of the very power their people rebelled against. Inside, a powerful and weary-looking man sits upon a makeshift throne, flanked by his guards. This is Gordius III, Emperor of the Vaffenclaw Empire, and he does not look pleased by the interruption. Athos and Gaia immediately bow, with Athos pleading that the rebellion was the sole decision of the former chief. Athos continues his plea, placing all the blame on the former chief Noel. He begs for the Emperor's mercy, hoping to quell his anger. But a cruel-looking prince standing beside the throne orders Gaia to look up. The moment he does, the prince delivers a vicious kick to his head. Gaia is stunned, the force of the blow rattling him to his core. The prince grinds his boot into Gaia's face, mocking their tribe as worthless barbarians. Athos cries out his nephew's name, helpless before the imperial guards. He rushes forward anyway, grabbing the prince's leg and begging for mercy. Pinned to the floor, Gaia's shock gives way to a simmering, cold rage. Suddenly, the Emperor's voice cuts through the tension, ordering his son, Muner, to stand down. The Emperor acknowledges their rebellion, but states he has no desire for needless bloodshed. He declares that from now on, the Bulmunt tribe will dedicate every last drop of their blood to the Empire. And with that oath of fealty, he will grant them his forgiveness. Athos immediately prostrates himself, thanking the Emperor for his profound mercy. One of the Imperial guards smirks, telling them to know their place. Thrown out of the camp, the word barbarians echoes in the air behind them. Gaia slowly comes back to his senses, the humiliation still fresh. His uncle holds him close, relieved that he's finally awake. Athos apologizes, lamenting that he had to paint Gaia's parents as villains to save their people. The words parents and barbarians swirl in Gaia's mind as he processes this new reality. His mind flashes back, accessing the memories of the original Gaia. He sees the brutal conflict between his tribe and the Empire. He remembers his mother, her face etched with sorrow and defeat. And he witnesses the final, tragic moments of his father, a man who fought and died for his people. But then, a different memory surfaces from a much simpler time. A young Gaia asks his father why the Empire calls them barbarians. His father explains that to the Empire, anyone who speaks a different language is a savage. The boy can't comprehend such ignorance, calling them fools for not understanding. A look of weary understanding crosses his father's face. His father laughs, ruffling his hair and agreeing with his son's assessment. He explains that their people have their own code, one that is not inferior, and that one day they will escape the Empire's control, to build a nation for their own tribe. The young boy looks up, his heart filled with his father's powerful dream. Back in the present, tears stream down Gaia's face as the memory ends. Athos is startled by his nephew's sudden emotional shift. Gaia insists that his physical wounds aren't the source of his pain. He clenches his fist, overcome with a burning rage at their humiliation. He questions why his parents had to die, all because they were labeled barbarians. His mind flashes back to his previous life, remembering he'd never felt an emotion this powerful before. He looks at his hand, wondering if this burning rage belongs to the original Gaia. But as tears of fury stream down his face, he realizes this feeling is now his own, vowing to never forgive the Empire. He clutches his head, trying to regain his composure in front of his uncle. Athos looks on with grim understanding, remarking on the misery of being powerless. He puts a comforting arm around Gaia, declaring that they must become strong. They soon arrive back at a humble dwelling within their village. Inside, the tribe's elders react with shock and disbelief to Athos's words. He stands firmly behind Gaia, announcing to the council that the boy will be their next chief. Athos's eyes are filled with an unshakable determination. Gaia is completely stunned by his uncle's sudden announcement. The elders immediately object, arguing that the boy is far too young for such a burden. But Athos is resolute, promising to guide Gaia and compensate for his inexperience. He pleads with the council to support his nephew as their new leader. The elders fall silent, weighing the gravity of his request. Seeing his unwavering conviction, they eventually agree to his terms. Later that night, Gaia privately questions his uncle, unsure if he's truly worthy of the role. Athos sits across from him, a calm and steady presence. The boy admits his fear, confessing that he has no confidence in himself. His uncle simply stares back, letting the boy's words hang in the air. Athos lets out a hearty laugh, agreeing that of course Gaia wouldn't be confident. His expression sobers as he begins to speak of Gaia's father, a truly brave man. He recalls how his brother was a dreamer who spoke of a future for their people, a dream Athos wanted to support. He acknowledges that Gaia is not his father, but still asks for his forgiveness for this burden. With a heavy gaze, he places all of his hope and expectations onto his nephew. Gaia meets his uncle's stare, his own fear hardening into resolve. Standing alone outside, he reflects on the impossible situation he's been thrown into. He remembers the thoughtless god and angel who put him in this mess to begin with. But if people are counting on him, he decides he will rise to meet their expectations. He looks to the stars and makes a new vow, to crush the Empire no matter what it takes. He remembers the angel's wild suggestions, focusing on one in particular, the smartphone. To his shock, a glowing tablet-like object materializes right before his eyes. He cautiously holds the strange device, wondering how this is even possible. It seems this is the smartphone, one of the special abilities the gods haphazardly granted him. He realizes the god probably had no idea what a smartphone actually was. A message from the god himself appears, calling it a highly advanced information terminal. He quickly discovers it contains detailed maps, along with information on all the local plants and animals. The name might be ridiculous, but he understands that in a world without proper maps, this power is extraordinary. He then notices another section dedicated to information on people, and the first profile he sees is that of his uncle Athos. His uncle's voice snaps him out of it, and Gaia flinches, trying to act natural. He stammers, unable to explain the glowing tablet that only he can see. Athos, seemingly oblivious, just tells him to help with rebuilding the fences destroyed by the Empire. He confirms his suspicion that the strange device is completely invisible to others. To everyone else, he was just staring at empty space, a mistake he vows not to make again. As they work, Athos discusses the village's repairs with another tribesman. The man reports that their storehouses were looted during the conflict, and their food supplies are dangerously low. Gaia overhears them conclude that they'll need money to buy more grain. Their tribe lives in a dense forest with little farmland, forcing them to hunt, gather, and trade for what they can't grow. And to trade for what they need, they require money, a resource they simply don't have. Most of the fertile land belongs to the Empire, forcing their tribe to trade for grain. This creates a contradiction. They must rebel against the very power they depend on for survival. As he ponders their dilemma, he consults the divine tablet for answers. He notices a strange icon on the map, something he doesn't recognize. It looks like a simple pile of rocks, perhaps a vein of ore. But the tablet's information clarifies that it's not just any rock, it's salt. A jolt of understanding hits him as he realizes it's a rock salt deposit. The tablet explains that this entire region was once a vast sea. A confident smile spreads across his face as a plan begins to form. And then it clicks. Rock salt is a valuable commodity, one they can sell. He knows that salt is essential for life, a rare and expensive commodity that his tribe has always had to buy. If they can mine this deposit, it could become the foundation of their tribe's entire economy. He checks the map again and sees the location is surprisingly close by. But a question nags at him, if it's so near. Why has no one in his tribe ever discovered it before? The answer comes in the form of a massive, roaring bear. And with a sudden grin, Gaia understands exactly why the area is off limits. The tablet identifies it as a bloody bear, a creature not considered particularly dangerous. Realizing the beast is more of a deterrent than a real threat, he decides to deal with the forest's guardian himself. With a small knife in hand, Gaia prepares to face the beast. He brings the blade down with all his might, only for it to bounce harmlessly off the creature's thick skull. He stares in disbelief, realizing his attack did absolutely nothing. The bear, however, is not so easily deterred and raises a massive paw. A powerful swipe sends him flying through the air. Back at the village, Athos learns where his nephew has gone and grows concerned. But Gaia soon returns, seemingly unharmed, much to his uncle's relief. He can't explain that his survival was thanks to his secret healing ability. The other villagers confirm his findings, lamenting that the bear's hide is too tough for any blade to pierce. Gaia stands before them, admitting that their blades can't pierce the creature's hide. He sighs, figuring they'll have to give up on the rock salt for the time being. Athos then questions him, asking why he went to such a dangerous place to begin with. Gaia explains that since they needed money, he went looking for a new resource for their tribe. He reasoned that something valuable might be found in the dangerous places they normally avoid. He declares that even if he's just a figurehead as their chief, he wants to do something for his people. The villagers are stunned by his sudden change, urging him not to overdo it just because he's the new chief. Some of them gently dismiss his ambition, saying that money matters are best left to Athos. But Athos cuts in, confidently stating that their tribe already has an industry to make money. Gaia looks back at him, completely unaware of what his uncle is talking about. Athos introduces Gaia to a group of rugged-looking tribespeople. A woman among them announces that it's time for work, their next client being the Algias kingdom. The warriors grumble about their employer, admitting they don't like the empire. But a job is a job as long as they get paid. The entire group is a flurry of activity, preparing their gear for the coming conflict. Some complain about missing weapons while others are just eager for the fight. Gaia observes their energy, as Athos explains that for their tribe, war is how they earn their keep. Just then, a man arrives to announce that a new shipment has been delivered. Inside a large crate is a fresh supply of gleaming swords. The warriors erupt in cheers, overjoyed at the sight of their new weapons. Gaia is stunned, asking his uncle how they could possibly afford such expensive equipment. Athos calmly explains that their new employer helped them out a little. He reveals that the empire itself is their client, providing not just weapons but food and an advance payment. Gaia admits he never expected such generous terms, assuming they'd be treated as disposable pawns. His uncle's expression turns serious as he begins to explain the bigger picture. He describes Emperor Gordius III as a warmonger, constantly fighting with neighboring kingdoms. And while their tribe lost the rebellion, their skill as mercenaries makes them valuable to the empire's ambitions. Gaia realizes this gives them a crucial bargaining chip. He praises his uncle's strategic mind, earning a bashful laugh in return. Another tribesman then approaches, telling Gaia to inspect the weapon since his old sword was damaged. The other warriors tease him, impressed that he actually took on the bloody bear. One of them asks if he's decided on that particular sword, but Gaia is lost in thought, realizing something has always felt off about their weapons. He holds the blade up to the light, a shocking conclusion dawning on him. It's made of bronze, not iron. Knowledge from his past life floods his mind, recalling that bronze is an alloy that's easy to work with but soft. He considers its properties, noting that while it's rust-resistant and simple to forge, it's vastly inferior to iron when it comes to crafting effective weapons. He remembers the Empire's soldiers, clad in superior iron armor, and understands that the metal isn't widely available. The other tribesmen confirm his theory, explaining that very little iron ever makes its way to their people, and because of its scarcity, the price is far too high for them to ever afford. He realizes now that their bronze weapons were the reason his blade failed against the bloody bear. Gaia understands that if they want to get stronger, they'll need to find a way to afford iron. Just then, one of the warriors approaches him with a proposal for their next battle. Gaia looks up, surprised by the sudden suggestion from the mustached man. The man explains that the upcoming conflict is larger than they anticipated, and their tribe alone won't be enough. He proposes that they ask the neighboring tribes for help. The scene shifts, revealing the diverse groups of people living in the surrounding lands. Among them are powerful lizardmen, a tribe known for their strength. And there are also the elves, masters of the bow who reside deep within the forests. These are the potential allies they would need to call upon. Gaia looks on in awe as the other tribes begin to arrive. Even the powerful Anglo and Vandal tribes have answered the call. The warrior explains that at the end of the day, everyone is here for the money. He then tasks Gaia with greeting the leaders, a crucial role for their new chief. Stealing his nerves, Gaia approaches the first group of potential allies, but his attention is quickly drawn to another group arriving in the distance. He spots a group of elves led by a woman with a sharp, focused gaze. Our boy is immediately struck by her beauty, completely captivated. She seems to notice his stare, turning to meet his eyes with an intense look. But when she speaks, he's completely lost, unable to understand a single word she's saying. He tries to speak, quickly realizing they don't share a common language. But then he remembers another one of the angel's haphazard promises, and is immediately struck by another wave of excruciating pain. The elvish language is being forcibly downloaded into his brain, just as the angel had suggested. He can only curse the gods for their painful, thoughtless methods. When the agony finally fades, he finds the elf woman holding his head with concern. He looks up, now understanding her perfectly, and assures her that he's fine. The elf is completely stunned, wondering how he can suddenly speak her language. But their conversation is cut short by the arrival of another tribe leader. A powerful lizardman steps forward, demanding to know which one of them is Gaia. Gaia and the elf woman are both taken aback by the sudden interruption. The lizardman introduces himself as Rosso, chief of the great lizard tribe, here to meet the Bullment's new leader. He looks around, asking where he can find the person he's supposed to greet. Gaia steps forward to identify himself, formally welcoming their new allies to the fight. The elf woman watches their exchange, her expression unreadable. Rosso seems pleased, shaking Gaia's hand with a firm grip. He then sizes Gaia up, questioning if someone so small can even eat properly, but Gaia just promises he'll grow. One of Rosso's warriors laughs heartily at the boy's bold claim. The elf, however, seems completely unimpressed by their foolish banter. Rosso then turns his attention to her, asking Gaia if she's one of the elves. Rosso remarks that the elves are reclusive and don't speak the common tongue. The elf woman glares back, clearly having understood every single word. She introduces herself as Jessica, Princess of the Alanef, clarifying that they simply choose not to speak the Barbarian language, and that she certainly won't be lectured on communication by the likes of the lizardmen. Rosso is stunned that she can understand them, calling her stingy for not speaking up sooner, but Jessica retorts that their own language is far more elegant and superior. Gaia watches the petty squabble, a familiar feeling washing over him. He finds himself caught between two proud tribes on the verge of a brawl. A wry smile crosses his face as he realizes what a dysfunctional alliance this truly is. But his thoughts are interrupted by Athos, who announces that it's time to move out. The mustached warrior tells Gaia they can finish their greetings on the way to the battlefield. He offers some words of encouragement, telling the new chief to do his best on the long road ahead. With a final call to arms, the combined forces begin their march. Gaia looks ahead, the reality of the situation sinking in. This will be his first battle. The long column of warriors snakes its way through the rugged mountain pass. They soon arrive at their destination, the vast Puros plain of the Algius kingdom. This fertile land, a constant point of contention between the two nations, was once a peaceful farming region. But now, where fields of wheat once grew, a forest of imperial spears stands ready for war. An Imperial general rallies his troops, declaring their mission is to crush the Algius army and reclaim this plain. He proclaims that the Waffenclaw Empire are the only rightful rulers of this land. Gaia watches as the general speaks of securing this land for the Empire. He declares they will show the Algius kingdom the true might of their emperor. With a cry for victory and glory, he rallies the soldiers who erupt in a thunderous cheer. Gaia can only watch, surprised by the fervent loyalty the emperor commands. He recalls that this is the same emperor who expanded his territory by conquering all his neighbors. And while this man is his parents' killer, he understands that to these people he's a hero. The general adds that their victory here will aid Prince Munner's campaign in the south. The Imperial soldiers stand at attention, their resolve hardened by his words. But Gaia overhears some of them whispering, questioning Prince Munner's ability to lead. The name echoes in his mind, a bitter reminder of the prince who humiliated him. The general dismisses his troops, ordering them to their designated positions. Gaia steps forward to ask the general where his own forces should go. The general, whose name is Hibidius, looks down at the boy with disdain. The Imperial soldiers murmur amongst themselves, wondering why a barbarian is here. They question how they can possibly trust mercenaries who don't even speak their language. Another soldier scoffs, dismissively referring to them as northern barbarians. The general explains that their fighting styles are too different to coordinate. He tells them to stay on the flanks and provide support from the outside. Gaia understands the general's polite phrasing for what it really is, a clear order to stay out of the way because they're seen as a nuisance. Jessica points out that coordinating their different fighting styles will be difficult. The Imperial soldiers just laugh, mocking them for being slow and clumsy. Gaia can only grimace, knowing they have no choice but to accept it after their defeat. The lizardmen seem completely unconcerned, having never even considered coordinating with the other tribes. Gaia finds a dark humor in the situation, realizing the Empire expects them to fail and fight amongst themselves. But the mustached warrior tells him not to worry, and to simply fight bravely like a wolf, for that is their tribe's honor. Gaia is taken aback by this simple, almost fatalistic view of battle. He can't help but think that this very philosophy is what got his parents killed. He observes his tribesmen, realizing their life as mercenaries has given them a completely different view on life and death. Back in his tent, he consults the tablet, convinced that his modern values are not wrong. A world with fewer deaths is always better. He knows he can't be naive on the battlefield, but he still wants to find a way to minimize the sacrifices his own mercenaries will have to make. They're here to earn a living, and he's determined to find a strategy that ensures their survival. He lets out a sigh, dismissing his own idea as too convenient to be realistic. But as he glances back at the tablet, his eyes suddenly widen in surprise. He stares at the glowing screen, questioning what he's just discovered. Suddenly, a massive vortex of dark energy erupts just outside his tent. The Imperial soldiers panic, wondering if it's a magic attack and realizing it's not from their side. Jessica points with a trembling hand, declaring that it's the work of the barbarians. Her face is a mask of shock and disbelief at the sudden betrayal. The Imperial soldiers scoff at her accusation, questioning if the girl has lost her mind. Jessica can only stare back, her face a mixture of shock and indignation. One of the soldiers coldly demands that she apologize for her outburst, but she fires back, insisting that it wasn't the elves and that they should be the ones to apologize. The soldiers just stand there, their expressions hardening with contempt. Gaia steps between them, surprised they're getting so worked up over this. The soldier continues his tirade, claiming that all the elves within the Empire are nothing more than slaves. He finishes with a crude remark, saying he just wanted to have some fun with the pretty elf. Jessica's eyes narrow with pure, unadulterated fury at his disgusting words. Gaia quickly steps in, trying to calm her down before the situation explodes. The soldiers continue their taunts, mockingly asking if the two are lovers. Gaia coldly remarks that these men are no different from the beasts they look down on. He then introduces himself as Gaia of the Bullment tribe, chief of the mercenaries. Jessica is stunned, realizing he's speaking the Imperial language fluently. He apologizes for his companion's outburst, but refuses to accept any further insults. With his hand on his sword, he reminds them that they are soldiers here, and asks if they'd prefer to be dealt with in the barbarian way they seem so fond of. But before a fight can break out, General Hibidius' voice cuts through the tension. He orders his men to stand down, furious that they're causing trouble at a time like this. The soldiers reluctantly back away, clicking their tongues in annoyance. The general orders his men to disperse, leaving Gaia and Jessica alone. Jessica is still trying to process how Gaia suddenly learned the Imperial language. She approaches him, wanting to ask about what just happened. But before she can, he suddenly grabs her hand. a look of intense focus on his face. He asked if she was the one responsible for that massive explosion of energy. The question hangs in the air as he realizes the elves must be able to use magic. Flustered, she can only stammer a confirmation, caught completely off guard. She explains that while the Empire has mages, the ability is far more common among her people. Gaia immediately starts grilling her for details, asking about their numbers, range, and limitations. Overwhelmed, she admits she doesn't know the specifics but suggests her uncle might. He eagerly clasps his hands, pleading with her to introduce him to her uncle. Jessica is completely flustered by his sudden intensity, wondering what's gotten into him. A stern-looking elf, the chief Elenif, asks if this is the boy from the Bulmant tribe who wants to know about their mages. Gaia sits up straight and confirms that he is indeed the one. The chief scoffs, asking what Gaia intends to do with that information, stating that their battle tactics are none of his concern. But Gaia looks him dead in the eye, ready to be completely honest. He leans forward, declaring that he wants the elves' cooperation for this battle. He explains that he has a strategy in mind, but his tribe alone doesn't have the strength to pull it off. Jessica interjects, reminding him that each tribe fights in their own way and can't be forced to coordinate. But Gaia insists that if his plan succeeds, it will benefit not just his people but the elves as well. The elf chief raises a hand, silencing Gaia's impassioned plea. He agrees to hear him out, but demands to know the boy's strategy first. Jessica watches with a skeptical frown, clearly unimpressed by the whole display. The chief explains that since Gaia showed them respect, it is their way to return the courtesy. Gaia is stunned that they'll cooperate, but the chief clarifies that the plan must be worth their while. With a confident smile, Gaia promises that they won't regret their decision. The chief considers his words, deciding to put his faith in the young leader. Overjoyed by this small victory, Gaia turns to leave the tent. He gives them a cheerful wave, his confidence fully restored. Jessica can only stare after him, completely bewildered by his sudden success. Jessica seems amused by his confidence, while her uncle just looks annoyed. The day of the battle arrives, a chance to show the Empire's might on the Poros Plain. The Imperial army stands in perfect formation, ready to bring righteous rule in their emperor's name. Their numbers stretch as far as the eye can see, a testament to the Empire's power. Each soldier stands with grim determination, their faces hidden behind their helmets. They await the command, a unified force ready for war. General Hibideus rallies his men, calling for the war god's blessing upon them. From the sidelines, Gaia and his tribesmen watch the display with stoic expressions. The general's eyes narrow with focus as he prepares to give the order to the infantry. And with the command to advance, the soldiers take one last drink before marching into battle. The Imperial soldiers lock their shields together, forming an impenetrable wall. An officer on horseback shouts a warning as the first volley of arrows approaches. A hail of arrows clatters against their defenses, but the line holds firm. On the opposing side, the Algius army prepares its own counter, with mages and archers at the ready. With a single command, they let their arrows fly. A blast of magic slams into the Imperial line, testing their resolve. The chaos of battle erupts as both sides exchange blows from a distance. But on the flanks, the lizardmen let out a ferocious battle cry, their bloodlust rising as they prepare to charge into the fray. The first casualties fall as the true battle finally begins. Rosso leads the lizardmen in a wild charge, eager for the fight. The mustached warrior rallies his own men, telling them not to be outdone. Jessica can only watch in dismay as the tribes rush headlong into battle. The elf chief questions Athos, worried they're being left behind in the chaos. Athos turns to his nephew, looking for guidance. But Gaia simply tells him that everything is going according to plan. With a confident smile, he declares that it's time for them to make their move. The Imperial soldiers on the main line notice the strange movement from the mercenaries. Gaia leads his tribe away from the main conflict, charging in a completely different direction. The soldiers can only stare in confusion, wondering if the barbarians have lost their minds. The lizardmen grumble, questioning the wolf tribe's bizarre movements. Even Gaia's own men are panicked, asking if he's sure about abandoning the main fight. The elves follow along, though they look just as confused by this sudden change in plans. But Gaia confidently assures them that this is the fastest way to reach their true target. His men question who he's even talking about, and Gaia reveals his audacious goal, to take out the enemy commander first. The tribesmen are completely stunned by the sheer boldness of his strategy. They question how he could possibly know the commander's location on such a chaotic battlefield. Gaia just smiles, explaining that he has a god's eye view on his side. The divine tablet displays a perfect tactical map of the entire battlefield. Meanwhile, in the Algius Kingdom's command tent, a game of strategy is laid out. Their commander asks his advisors what will be the key to covering for their efforts in this battle. His men are quick to praise the bravery of their own warriors, certain that victory is already guaranteed. The commander casually agrees, taking a sip from his cup. But one of them seems less convinced, asking what the commander truly thinks. He says nothing, his expression unreadable as his cup is refilled. His eyes, however, reveal a sharp and calculating mind. And as the enemy leadership relaxes, Gaia leads his small strike force through the wilderness. His own tribesmen can't believe it, asking if he's truly serious about this reckless plan. But with a look of pure determination, he shouts back that he has never been more serious. He explains that while they lack numbers and equipment, they have one weapon the enemy doesn't: the Divine Tablet, which provides perfect real-time information on the battlefield. His plan is to exploit the enemy's blind spot, circling around to strike the commander from the flank. But he knows the commander is protected by cavalry, a force his foot soldiers can't hope to match head-on. With a wild grin, he reminds them that fighting bravely like a wolf is the Bullman tribe's way. His men can only shout back in disbelief at the sheer audacity of his plan. Even Athos looks worried as the other warriors question their young chief's sanity. But his uncle's expression hardens, understanding that their only target is the commander. Gaia explains that if they succeed, the enemy's command structure will collapse, giving the Empire a massive advantage. And if the battle ends quickly, it will mean fewer deaths and injuries for their own people, making the risk worth taking. The mustached warrior listens intently, weighing the boy's words. Jessica looks on as Gaia passionately explains the final details of his plan. After a moment of silence, the warrior comes to a decision. He breaks into a wide grin, declaring that he'll follow his new chief's lead. Athos is stunned by the sudden shift as the other warriors begin to rally behind the boy. They laugh, agreeing that while their last chief was bold, this new one is even crazier. Meanwhile, on the main battlefield, the chaos of war rages on. A massive blast of magic slams into the Imperial Army's front line, but an officer on horseback rallies his men, ordering them to hold their defensive positions. The Imperial mages raise a barrier, confident they can withstand the enemy's assault. An Imperial officer complains that he'll never get used to the jarring sounds of magic. He notes that while powerful, the enemy's magic is limited and easily nullified by their barriers. Another officer observes that only their own mages are capable of holding such a strong defense. They both agree that the enemy's occasional magical attacks are more of a nuisance than a real threat. General Hibadias turns to a scout, asking for a report on the front lines. The scout confirms that the enemy's strength is roughly equal to their own, resulting in a stalemate. The general decides against deploying the cavalry, seeing no need to escalate a simple war of attrition. His subordinate sighs, realizing this means the battle will drag on for much longer than a day. The general then asks if there's anything else unusual to report from the battlefield. A scout informs him that a unit of barbarian mercenaries has broken formation and fled into the forest. The general is taken aback, questioning the scout's report about the barbarians. His subordinate finds it hard to believe, noting their reputation for bravery. The general considers this, his gaze drifting toward the forest. But just then, a massive explosion erupts from the enemy's rear flank. The general demands to know which direction the attack came from. He orders his men to report on the barbarians' movements immediately. His soldiers can only stand by, just as confused by the sudden turn of events. Meanwhile, Gaia's forces continue their charge through the dense woods. Athos praises his nephew's skill in convincing the elves to join their risky plan. But Gaia's expression remains grim, suggesting there's a catch. He reveals the catch. He also brought the lizardmen along for the ride, much to Athos's surprise. Rosso just smirks, admitting he knew something was up, and decided to follow the sharp young chief. Jessica calls out to Gaia as they reach a vantage point overlooking their target. Across a large body of water lies the Algius Kingdom's command post. Gaia confirms that this is the encampment they've been looking for. He points out that their target, the enemy commander, is located deep within. His divine tablet gives him a perfect layout of the enemy's position. The mustached warrior notes that their target is protected by cavalry, a formidable opponent. But Gaia reveals the first step of his plan. The elves will use their magic to break the enemy's formation. His own men are skeptical, questioning if their magic can even reach that far. The elf chief suggests that bows would be more effective, but Gaia insists that magic is what they need. He just needs them to trust him and aim exactly where he tells them to. With a determined gaze, Gaia points out the precise opening in the enemy's defenses. Across the water, the enemy cavalry remains completely unaware of the coming threat, until one of the officers spots a disturbance in the distance. He sees Gaia's combined forces charging across the open field toward them. The warriors of the Bulmant and Great Lizard tribes lead the vanguard with a ferocious cry. Panic erupts among the cavalry as they realize it's a surprise attack from the flank. Their commander barks orders, telling his men not to panic against mere foot soldiers. But as the cavalry prepares to countercharge, the elves get into position. A massive vortex of elven magic descends upon the unsuspecting cavalry. The soldiers are thrown into chaos, completely blindsided by the attack. An officer demands to know what happened to their defensive barrier, which is still active. The commander dismisses it as a lucky shot that found a gap, ordering his men to calm down. But another blast of dark energy slams into their ranks with pinpoint accuracy. A soldier looks back in terror, completely bewildered by the relentless assault. One of Gaia's men cheers as the attack lands, while our boy calmly gives the elves their next target. Jessica can only stare in disbelief, amazed that they managed to land another consecutive hit. The enemy wonders how they're being targeted from so far away, without any visible barrier to aim for. But Gaia's gaze is fixed, as if he can see every single opening on the battlefield. With the enemy's formation shattered, Gaia announces that the path to their target is clear. He gives the order for the barbarian mercenaries to charge. Athos and the mustached warrior lead the way, pushing their men forward into the fray. Every warrior's face is a mask of grim determination. The combined forces crash into the disorganized cavalry with overwhelming force. The battle quickly descends into a brutal close-quarters melee. The cavalry commander curses their audacity, enraged that mere foot soldiers would challenge them. Rosso easily dispatches one of the riders, taunting him for his slow movements. The mercenaries fight with a ferocity the enemy soldiers are completely unprepared for. Athos rallies the troops, shouting that the enemy commander is just ahead. Amidst the chaos, Gaia cuts his way through the enemy ranks. He scans the faces of the officers, realizing none of them are his true target. His men desperately search for the commander, lost in the sea of soldiers. But Gaia remains calm, his eyes fixed on a single point in the distance. The cavalry commander, overwhelmed by the assault, finally calls for a full retreat. A slow smile spreads across Gaia's face as he whispers that he's found him. His eyes gleam with a hunter's intensity, declaring that the commander is his prey. The commander continues to shout orders, completely unaware of the danger closing in. But Gaia is already there, his blade poised to strike the unsuspecting leader. The man can only stare in disbelief, his retreat cut short by the boy's sudden appearance. He plunges his sword not into the man, but into the commander's horse. Gaia shouts his name, declaring he's here to claim the general's head. The commander refuses to be taken down by a mere mercenary, but before his men can intervene, Rosso intercepts the attack meant for Gaia. Gaia glances back, surprised by the timely assist. The lizard man chief just grins, telling him to focus on the real prize. Enraged, the commander glares down at the boy who unseated him. He readies his spear, preparing to finish this himself. Gaia dodges the powerful thrust, narrowly avoiding the sharp tip. He realizes the spear's reach is too great, and he can't get close enough to strike. He decides that if his blade can't reach, he'll just have to close the distance himself. But the commander is faster, running him clean through with the spear. The man mocks his recklessness, certain that the boy's sword is now useless. But Gaia just tightens his grip on the spear's shaft. Much to the commander's growing horror, he pulls himself along the weapon, closing the final gap between them. With a final lunge, he tackles the commander to the ground, pinning him. The commander can only stare up in disbelief, assuming this is a suicide attack. But Gaia looks down at the fatal wound and calmly apologizes. Because thanks to the god's gift, this injury is about to disappear. He tells the commander that he's the only one who will be dying today. And with a final decisive strike, the battle is over. Rosso cries out his name, worried about the boy's fatal wound. But Gaia just smiles, reassuring him that while it hurts, he's not going to die. He confirms that the man on the ground is indeed their target. A lizard man roars that Gaia of the barbarian mercenaries has slain the enemy general. The LGS soldiers can only stare in stunned disbelief. Even Gaia's own men are in shock, shouting his name in amazement. Jessica watches from afar, completely floored that he actually pulled it off. The news of the commander's fall begins to spread across the battlefield. The remaining Algiers soldiers are enraged by the humiliation of their defeat. An officer declares they can't face their prince after such a disgraceful loss. He orders his men to show no mercy and hunt down every last one of them. Athos sees the enemy regrouping and shouts for everyone to retreat before they're surrounded. The enemy cavalry thunders across the plain, charging forward to cut off their escape. But Gaia and Rosso are stunned to see another force suddenly intercepting the attack. It's the Imperial cavalry, finally making their move on the battlefield. Gaia's men erupt in cheers, relieved by the unexpected backup. The Imperial forces ride past, joining the fray to finish what Gaia started. The Imperial cavalry finally arrives on the scene. Gaia can only watch as the soldiers acknowledge his mercenary forces. General Hibadius gives a nod of grudging respect, thanking them for their efforts. Gaia is still taken aback by the sudden change in attitude, but a confident smile begins to form on his face. He reminds himself that as long as they get paid, this victory is all that matters. The scene suddenly shifts to a pixelated map, detailing a new life in another world. A giant beetle reflects on the annihilation of the local forest wolves, deciding to gather information from the villagers. Elsewhere, a young boy with a girl by his side spots a familiar group of adventurers in the distance. He approaches a man who apologizes, explaining that the quest to exterminate the wolves has already been completed. By listening to the locals, he learns he's in the Verdolin Kingdom, on the northern edge of the continent. Suddenly, one of the children points up into the trees, having spotted something unusual. It's the giant beetle, who wonders why these children are wandering the forest alone. But one of the boys is thrilled by the discovery, promising to protect his friend from the creature. The beetle seems to understand the boy's awe, recognizing a kindred spirit. The children decide to return with a net, while the beetle plans to flee if any adults appear. For now, it stays put, hoping to gather more information from their conversation. But the bespectacled boy senses that something is off about the situation. Just then, a beautiful butterfly appears, identified as a level 22 monster. The beetle panics, realizing another monster is dangerously close to the unsuspecting children. The beetle watches the children, pondering if it should have chosen a different evolutionary path. But a sudden premonition causes it to use a life detection skill. Its senses confirm the worst. A massive level 31 poison spider is lurking nearby. It realizes the butterfly is just bait, a lure for a much deadlier predator. As the children follow the creature, the beetle decides to trail them from a distance. The butterfly continues its mesmerizing flight, leading them deeper into the woods. But the bespectacled boy's eyes narrow, sensing that something is terribly wrong. The beetle sees the trap ahead, a giant web where the children are about to be devoured. Realizing it has to act now, it launches itself into the air. And with a powerful tackle, it intercepts the butterfly, knocking it off course. The beetle finds itself caught in the spider's web, the massive predator looming over it. The spider pauses, realizing this new prey is not the one it was expecting. As the butterfly flies away, it scolds the spider for attacking its own partner. The beetle realizes the children are still unconscious, trapped in a deep magical sleep. The enraged spider unleashes a powerful slicing attack on its trapped victim. The beetle braces for impact, its hardened shell deflecting the blow. But it remains hopelessly tangled in the sticky threads of the web. With the butterfly gone, the beetle's sacrifice has bought the children a precious few moments. On the ground, one of the boys begins to stir, the butterfly's spell starting to wear off. He jolts awake in a panic as the girl beside him cries out that the monster is being killed. The boy jolts awake, realizing the butterfly was luring them to be eaten. His friend wonders why they were saved, pointing out that the spider is now in pieces. But the bespectacled boy adjusts his glasses, declaring that it was a beetle. The other children can only stare, completely confused by his statement. He insists that the only other creature he saw was the silver beetle that fought the spider. Watching from a distance, the beetle realizes the children are talking about its intervention. The kids decide to take the spider's leg as a trophy, much to the beetle's bemusement. They soon return to their village and are immediately swept up in the arms of their worried parents. The camera pans out, showing the peaceful village they call home. Elsewhere, the adventurer from before is still puzzled, believing all the local monsters have been dealt with. The village elder confirms the monsters have decreased, but dismisses the children's story about a beetle. Listening from a nearby tree, the beetle feels a pang of guilt, realizing it's the one who hunted them all. Meanwhile, the boy it saved decides he needs to level up and will follow the adventurers to the town of Wavel. As the adventurers make their way through the forest, they easily dispatch another monster. But as they travel through the night, they notice the strange absence of creatures, unaware of the shadow following them. The young boy, however, looks up and spots the familiar beetle watching over them. They soon arrive at their destination, the large and bustling town of Wavel. The scene then shifts back to the rugged mountains as Gaia's forces prepare to depart. A woman from the tribe complains that the Empire is already sending them to the next war zone. But the other mercenaries just laugh, declaring that as long as they're earning money, the battlefield doesn't matter. One of the warriors calls out, reminding everyone not to leave anything behind. The mustached warrior explains to Gaia that this is a two-front war. He suspects that their next destination is the true heart of the conflict. Their target is revealed, Korin Castle, a key southern fortress of the Algius Kingdom. Imperial soldiers are already in the midst of a brutal siege scaling the high walls. The defenders fight back fiercely, raining down arrows and stones on the attackers. The assault is costly, with soldiers warning each other of the dangers from above. As dusk approaches, an Imperial commander finally calls for a full retreat for the day. The fortress stands imposing and unbroken as the sun begins to set. Back in the Imperial camp, the soldiers regroup after a long and fruitless day of fighting. Inside the camp, the soldiers seem surprisingly relaxed, sharing drinks and food. A merchant even tries to sell them cheap drinks, adding to the festive air. Gaia and Athos observe the scene, a bit bewildered by the mood. He asks his uncle if this is really a military camp. The atmosphere feels completely different from the Puros plain. Athos explains that it's not unusual for merchants to gather where armies are stationed. Gaia realizes this is why they didn't see any merchants before, since that battle ended so quickly. His uncle seems to agree, but something about the scene still feels strange. He decides they should report their arrival to the main camp first. They make their way toward the command post, guarded by Imperial soldiers. The guards at the command post recognize them as the Barbarian mercenaries. One of them remarks on their quick arrival, suggesting their last battle must have been easy. Gaia explains that he's just here to greet the commander. The soldier just dismisses him, telling them to follow along. But as they're led through the camp, the festive atmosphere is jarring. Soldiers are laughing and drinking, completely at ease. Gaia can't help but feel that something is off about this place. They're brought to the commander's tent and warned to watch their mouths. But as they enter, Gaia is hit by the strong scent of perfume, and he's immediately bumped into by a woman in a lavish dress. The woman tells him to watch where he's going, while her companion sips her drink, unimpressed. They comment on how young he is, casually asking if he's one of the soldiers. One of them turns to the commander, excitedly announcing that they have guests. The portly man in charge looks up from his drink, annoyed by the interruption. And sitting beside him is a face Gaia knows all too well, Prince Munir. Gaia freezes, the memory of his humiliation flashing through his mind. The prince's eyes widen in cruel recognition, a smirk spreading across his face. Athos steps forward, formally announcing that the mercenaries from the Puros plain have arrived. But the prince just takes a slow, deliberate sip from his cup, ignoring them completely. And without warning, he hurls the heavy goblet right at Athos's head. Gaia can only cry out as his uncle stumbles back, clutching his head in pain. The portly commander complains that he's trying to relax and doesn't want to be bothered by their trivial reports. He scoffs at the idea of needing barbarian mercenaries, calling it a complete waste of time. With a snap of his fingers, the prince orders his subordinate to throw the filthy barbarians out. Athos quickly grabs Gaia, trying to hold him back before his rage gets them both killed. He tells his nephew that their greeting is over and that it's time for them to leave. Outside, Athos asks the subordinate where their mercenary forces should be stationed. The man just looks confused, telling them to find any open space they can. The dismissive order to just find a spot anywhere hangs in the air. The subordinate casually adds that there's no rush, since the siege of Korin Castle is already well underway. The portly commander explains his plan to slowly wear down the castle's defenses. He's confident that with enough time, the kingdom's soldiers will simply break. But as they watch from a distance, they spot a ship setting sail in the dead of night. Athos questions why a boat would be leaving at such a strange hour. The subordinate is just as confused, certain that it must be a mistake. But Athos's gaze confirms that what they're seeing is very real. The soldier dismisses it as a merchant ship, though he admits it's strange they're sailing without lights. Gaia and his uncle listen, but something about the situation still feels wrong. He admits that he's no expert on military matters, but he can tell that this entire camp has grown far too complacent. He wonders if the prince's incompetence is just a clever act, before quickly dismissing the thought. He grits his teeth, reminding himself that a job is a job, no matter how much he dislikes his employer. Athos then turns to him, asking if he happened to notice the ship from before. Gaia can only stare back with a blank expression. His uncle explains that he thought he saw something sailing out on the water. Gaia admits he didn't see it, but wonders if his divine tablet might have caught it. Athos then changes the subject, wanting to discuss the battle for Korin Castle. He shocks his nephew by suggesting that the Imperial army might actually lose this fight. Gaia immediately asks for an explanation, unable to comprehend how that's possible. He looks around the camp, realizing that with 20,000 soldiers, the merchants treat it more like a festival than a war zone. Jessica points out that the sheer number of merchants is proof that this battle has been dragging on for a long time, and she adds that this is certainly nothing to be happy about. Rosso, however, is just thrilled about all the food, much to Jessica's disgust. But even he admits that this battlefield feels strangely boring and lax. The other warriors wonder if they were called here as reinforcements, because the Empire is short-handed. Gaia, however, is taking the opportunity to explore the market, with Rosso teasing him about it. The Lizardman chief then turns his attention to the two of them. He asks Jessica why she came along if she's so uninterested in the market. She stammers, claiming it's her duty to observe the other tribe leaders. But Rosso just laughs, teasing that she really just wanted to spend time with Gaia. Jessica is completely flustered by his accusation. She quickly regains her composure, though her annoyance is clear. She insists that's not the case, while Gaia calmly states he's not just here to play around. As they walk through the bustling market, a hooded figure observes them from the side. Jessica notes that the merchants aren't from the Empire, their clothing suggesting they've traveled from many different lands. Gaia observes the diverse crowd, realizing the Empire's surveillance must be lax here. But Rosso's attention is quickly captured by a stall selling unfamiliar fruit. He points excitedly at a pile of bright orange spheres. Jessica wonders what kind of fruit it is, but Gaia recognizes them as oranges from his past life. The merchant smiles as Rosso admits he's never seen anything like it in their own forests. The merchant explains that the oranges are a fresh delicacy brought in from the south. The hooded figure with Gaia asks the man if they can have a sample. Gaia is taken aback by the sudden request. He realizes the merchants are from the Algius kingdom, the very people they're at war with. He points out that while the man speaks the imperial tongue, his companion has a distinct kingdom accent. The merchant seems impressed, admitting that Gaia is quite perceptive. He introduces himself as Kalanis, confirming he is indeed from the Algius kingdom. For a merchant like him, he explains, there is no empire or kingdom, only a place to do business. He assures them he has an official permit to operate here, putting Jessica's mind at ease. Rosso is overjoyed by the taste, while even Jessica seems surprised by how delicious it is. The merchant offers them another southern fruit, asking if it's their first time trying such delicacies. Rosso is absolutely delighted by the taste, much to the merchant's amusement. Kalanis explains that the fruit keeps well, making it perfect for a long journey back to the Barbarian lands. Gaia's expression sharpens at the familiar derogatory term. He questions why the merchant would call them that, catching the man off guard. The merchant explains that seeing them with elves and lizardmen, he deduced they were the northern mercenaries he'd heard about. Gaia can only smile, impressed by the man's sharp powers of observation. Kalanis then asks if they're here to buy provisions, offering a wide selection of fresh ingredients. But Gaia explains he needs something lighter and longer lasting, enough to feed his entire mercenary force. The merchant agrees that it's possible, but his expression suggests there's a catch. The merchant's eyes narrow, realizing Gaia is asking for military rations. But Gaia just smiles, explaining it's a precaution to ease his own worries. The merchant offers a polite apology for his forwardness. He explains that while his current stock is low, he'll let them know when more arrives. As they walk away, Rosso remarks that the merchant is quite skilled. Gaia agrees, gesturing back toward the smiling man. Rosso adds that the man's movements are unusually sharp for a simple vendor. Gaia's expression hardens as he agrees that the man is no mere merchant. He consults his tablet, confirming the man is a soldier, likely a spy for the Algius kingdom. Rosso and Jessica are completely stunned by the sudden dangerous revelation. Gaia confirms his suspicions, realizing this battlefield is a complete mess. Jessica is still reeling from the news that a spy is in their midst. She realizes his earlier warning to be ready to escape wasn't a joke. He then recalls asking his uncle why he thought the Empire could possibly lose. Athos explains that if he wasn't mistaken, he saw a ship sailing toward Koran Castle. The portly commander had dismissed it as an imperial ship, noting the prince's incompetence. But Athos knew the Empire had no reason to send a ship out at night. Gaia listens intently as his uncle pieces the puzzle together. He suggests the ship might be from the Algius kingdom, possibly carrying supplies, and while the Empire has the castle surrounded, its fall is far from guaranteed. Gaia agrees, realizing that resupplying the castle changes everything. Athos explains that with fresh supplies, the defenders can maintain their fighting strength indefinitely. It also means the Algius kingdom is fully aware of the situation inside the fortress, and soldiers who know help is on the way will fight with renewed tenacity, making the siege a losing battle for the Empire. Gaia recalls his uncle's words, now understanding the full gravity of that single ship he saw. Jessica and Rosso listen with growing concern as the pieces fall into place. Gaia then mentions the merchant, Kalanis, and his confident promise to secure them provisions. He realizes the Algius kingdom must have already established a secure supply route to the castle. Jessica closes her eyes, accepting the grim truth of their predicament. Gaia concludes they must prepare to escape, doubting the prideful empire would ever help them in a retreat. Rosso asks if the Imperial army is even aware of this critical flaw. Gaia doubts it, wondering if they should even bother telling them. Jessica scoffs, clearly having little faith in their employers. Rosso questions why they should help the Empire, given their relationship. Gaia admits he doubts the prideful Imperials would listen to a group of barbarians, but Rosso insists that it's not a meaningless gesture. He explains that as hired mercenaries, they have a duty to fulfill, a matter of professional honor. Gaia seems to understand, a new resolve forming in his eyes. But when they bring their concerns to the portly commander, he scoffs at the very idea that the Empire could lose. He dismisses their warning, confident that with their numbers, victory is inevitable. Rosso points out that they can't possibly stop the enemy's resupply efforts on their own. But Gaia tries to explain that the individual ships aren't the real problem here. Suddenly, the commander's subordinate bursts in, shouting that Prince Munar is summoning him. The commander panics, revealing that the prince is the supreme commander and will only accept reports of a great victory. Gaia can only stare, realizing he's done all he can to warn them. As the commander rushes off, he mutters about the outrageous things the barbarians dared to suggest. But a flicker of doubt crosses his face as he tries to dismiss the very idea of defeat. Rosso just lets out a dry, humorless laugh at the sheer incompetence. A moment later, the subordinate returns, frantically shouting that the prince is growing impatient. The Imperial officers scramble away, terrified of facing their leader's wrath. Back in the market, Gaia's men discuss the provisions they'll need for a long journey. Calanus confirms their order and asks if they require pack animals for the supplies. One of the tribesmen agrees to the deal, offering to pay with Imperial silver and their horses. Rosso is stunned, questioning why they would ever sell their valuable horses. Calanus explains that horses are expensive to maintain and offers a fair price for them. He suggests they take mountain donkeys instead, which are better suited for rough, unpaved roads. The tribesmen laugh, wondering when they'd ever need to travel such paths, but Calanus just smiles. One of the warriors asks if Calanus can continue to supply them in the future, but the merchant politely declines, explaining that he plans to return to his own country soon. Gaia watches the exchange, a thoughtful expression on his face as he files away this crucial piece of information. Calanus explains that since he's sold out of his goods, he'll be closing up shop and leaving the next day. But Gaia understands the hidden message. The spy's work is done, and kingdom reinforcements are just days away. He simply wishes the man a safe journey, playing along with the charade for now. He reflects on the Algius kingdom, a powerful eastern nation and the Empire's long-standing rival. As Calanus walks away, he tells his companion that forging a relationship with Gaia's people is a good move. Gaia listens, realizing the man is making a calculated political offer. The merchant admits he's very interested in the Barbarian tribe as a potential business partner. He then adds that he hopes they can meet again once this war is finally over. Gaia is taken aback by the directness of the invitation. The two shake hands, with Calanus promising that he'll be waiting for Gaia's visit. Back in their own camp, Gaia holds a council with the other tribe leaders. He warns them all to pay close attention to the battlefield's shifting conditions. One of his men argues they've been paid, so they shouldn't worry about the Empire's fate. Gaia agrees, stating they've fulfilled their duty by giving their warning. He admits he's anxious, but refuses to be a victim of the Empire's arrogance. His only mission now is to get every single one of his people home safely. Meanwhile, across the water, the siege of Corin Castle continues. A soldier reports to a new commander that the Algias reinforcements have arrived. The commander calmly acknowledges the report, ready for the coming battle. This is the prince of the Algius kingdom, and he has finally come to turn the tide. The next morning, the sun rises over the quiet landscape. But on the castle walls, the Imperial soldiers are dangerously complacent. They casually chat about their night of drinking, completely unaware of their duty, until one of them finally notices something strange on the horizon. Across the water, a fleet of ships is rapidly approaching. They realize it's not just one or two, but an entire armada. The Algius kingdom's main army has arrived, a sea of soldiers ready for battle. The guards wonder if these are Imperial reinforcements they weren't expecting. But the truth dawns on them in a wave of pure terror. It's an enemy attack. An officer confirms the worst, reporting that the Algius army is bearing down on them from the north. The portly commander is told that being surrounded is now just a matter of time, but he refuses to believe it, boasting that their numbers are more than enough to crush the Algius army. His subordinate tries to explain the full gravity of the situation, as a massive fleet from the Algius kingdom is also approaching from the sea, trapping them in a pincer. The commander can only stare, his confidence completely shattered. His shock turns to rage as he demands someone report this disaster to Prince Munar immediately. Elsewhere, Athos notes the commotion from their rear, and Gaia confirms that the reinforcements have arrived. The other mercenaries begin to panic, realizing it's time to make their escape. Gaia consults his tablet, confirming that with enemies on land and sea, a full encirclement is imminent. The tactical map shows the grim reality. The Imperial army is caught in a perfect trap. He sees that while the Empire isn't outnumbered, their only hope is to break the encirclement now. And though he despises the Empire, he has no desire to see more needless death. He tells his people to prepare to move out while he warns the main camp one last time. But as he runs, he realizes the enemy is moving far faster than he expected, wondering who could be leading them. The answer dawns on him: the Prince of the Algius Kingdom. His tablet confirms it, pulling up the profile of a man named Alex. Elsewhere, that very same prince looks out over the water toward the besieged castle. His subordinate reports that the encirclement is nearly complete, and Alex calmly acknowledges the news. His eyes are fixed on the fortress, thinking of the people of Corony, as he promises them that their long wait is finally over. With a confident smile, Prince Alex gives the order to begin the assault. His eyes narrow with focus as he commands his men to trample their enemies. And with a thunderous cry, the Algius army charges into battle. Back in the Imperial camp, a soldier bursts into the command tent with an urgent report. He explains that their northern forces are being crushed by the Algias army and asks Prince Munar for his orders. But Munar just glares back, drunkenly questioning why he's being bothered. He throws his cup in a rage, screaming that it's their job to figure out what to do on their own. Gaia can only watch in disbelief, wondering if the prince is truly drinking at a time like this. Munar continues his tirade, calling his subordinate incompetent for needing permission to act. He blames them for the army's failure, insisting that a simple head-on charge is all they need to win. He dismisses them with a wave, ordering them to get back to their posts and stop bothering him. The soldier tries to protest, stammering that if they do nothing, the army will be lost. But Gaia steps forward, urging the prince to make a decision and order a retreat. Prince Munar just glares at him, completely unimpressed by the interruption. He scoffs at the very idea, questioning how a barbarian could possibly suggest such a cowardly act. His subordinate recognizes Gaia, realizing this is the same boy from before. Gaia insists that the enemy is moving too quickly, and if they hesitate, even a retreat will be impossible. But Munar just calls his own army incompetent, refusing to believe the enemy could ever outmaneuver them. His subordinate nervously agrees, but mentions that the enemy's prince is a renowned general, and Gaia confirms their worst fears. That very Prince Alex is the one leading the charge. The soldiers murmur the name in disbelief, shocked that Prince Alex is truly here. A vision of the prince flashes through their minds, a formidable warrior cutting through his enemies. They remember his title: Alex the Ever-Victorious, the Silver Lion of Algius. Gaia listens as the soldiers recall Alex's recent conquest of an entire country in just a few days. He realizes now just how famous and how dangerous their new opponent truly is. The subordinate begs Prince Munar to reconsider a retreat, but the prince furiously dismisses the idea. Munar panics, terrified of what his father, the Emperor, would say if he ordered a withdrawal. His subordinate quickly reframes it not as a retreat, but as a tactical redeployment to Coron Castle. The other soldiers immediately agree, seeing the logic in the face-saving maneuver. The subordinate explains that to break the encirclement, this is a strategic necessity that the Emperor will surely understand. Prince Munar strokes his chin, mulling over the face-saving suggestion. He quickly rationalizes that his own safety is, of course, the army's top priority. With his fragile ego intact, he finally gives the order for the entire army to redeploy. The subordinate officer relays the command, ordering a full withdrawal toward the Puros Plain. Gaia and Athos can only let out a collective sigh at the sheer incompetence on display. Our boy admits that this situation is far worse than he could have ever imagined. With the Algias fleet closing in, it's clear the Empire's retreat will be a bloody and difficult one. But Gaia tells his uncle this gives them the perfect excuse to follow their own escape plan. Just as they prepare to leave, Athos suddenly cries out in alarm. An Imperial soldier blocks their path, calling them incompetent fools. The subordinate officer stops them, dismissing something he was about to say about their arrival. He then gets straight to the point, explaining that he has a proposal for them. Gaia and Athos listen with caution, completely caught off guard by the sudden offer. Meanwhile, on the front lines, Prince Alex effortlessly cuts down an Imperial soldier. His men ask if he's all right, and he calmly assures them that he is. He then rallies his troops, shouting for them to press forward and save their comrades in Coron Castle. The Algiers soldiers are visibly inspired by their prince's presence, and with a thunderous roar they charge into battle, ready to die for their leader. A subordinate pleads with him to fall back, warning him of the danger. But Alex dismisses the concern, explaining he's just here to rally the troops and will return shortly. He confirms that the spy's intel was correct. The Imperial Army has no real command structure. His subordinate suggests this battle is beneath him, but Alex clarifies he's no warmonger. He explains that his people are his kingdom's greatest asset, and he wants to save them with minimal casualties. Unlike the Waffenclaw Emperor, he has no desire to become a battle-crazed fool. He notes that the Emperor's son, Muner, inherited none of his father's talent, making him a perfect bargaining chip. A confident smile spreads across his face as he considers the opportunity. Just then, a scout rushes forward with an urgent report for the prince. He explains that the Imperial Army is gathering on the main road, preparing for a full retreat. Alex seems almost amused, remarking that his opponent isn't a complete fool after all. With a sudden grin, he declares he'll go see Prince Muner's skills for himself, much to his subordinate's shock. His subordinate desperately tries to stop him, warning of the extreme danger. He can't believe the prince would rush into battle after claiming not to be a warmonger. But elsewhere on the battlefield, a new development is taking shape. The Imperial officer explains his proposal. Gaia's mercenaries will cover the army's retreat. Jessica immediately relays the order, telling the elves to take their positions on the right. A massive wave of elven magic erupts, carving a path through the enemy forces. The Imperial soldiers are stunned, realizing the way is clear for their escape. Gaia shouts at them to move, reminding them that their cowardly prince won't be coming to help. The subordinate officer can only stare, shocked by the boy's blunt assessment. The soldiers grumble at the Barbarian's insults, but agree they have no desire to die for a lost cause. His men begin to panic, asking if they're being left behind to die. The Imperial soldiers are furious, questioning why only the Barbarians are allowed to retreat. The portly commander realizes with horror that Prince Muner is also caught in the chaos. But Gaia reminds them of the one thing that matters: the money they were promised. The subordinate officer reveals the true plan. The mercenaries will secretly escort the prince to safety. Gaia questions if the commander is truly okay with this arrangement. The officer just scoffs, admitting he doesn't care about the details anymore. He explains it's better to act on his own judgment than wait for confusing orders from above. He then points out that Gaia's earlier warning has likely alerted the enemy to the prince's presence. The officer suddenly panics, realizing this makes Prince Muner the enemy's #1 target. The officer explains that their tribe will act as a decoy, a separate force to cover the prince's escape. He clenches his fist, declaring that he must get Prince Muner back to the Empire alive. He admits that if he fails, he'll be executed for this disaster, making this a desperate plea. But if they succeed, he promises they will be rewarded handsomely for their service. Outside, the Imperial Army is in a state of complete chaos, their retreat turning into a panicked rout. Athos questions if they should really risk their lives for money, but Gaia sees a greater opportunity. The Imperial officer calls out to Gaia, anxiously asking if he's really going to proceed. Gaia just looks back with a calm resolve, his divine tablet already in hand. The map shows the Imperial Army's strategy to concentrate their forces and break the encirclement. But Gaia notes that the Algiers army is already moving to counter them, proving Prince Alex is a truly brilliant commander. But Gaia realizes this chaotic situation isn't entirely a bad thing for them. The tablet shows that if they concentrate their forces, they can break through the thinned-out encirclement. His plan is simple: punch through the enemy line and escape into the dense forest. With the supplies they bought from Calanus, their tribe is well equipped to navigate the mountains and lose any pursuers. The other warriors agree, knowing they just have to survive long enough to break free. But as Gaia checks his map one last time, his expression turns grim. The tablet shows a new enemy force moving rapidly to intercept their escape route. He wonders if they can slip past the kingdom's army without a fight. But a closer look reveals the enemy numbers are far greater than he anticipated. With a jolt of panic, he screams for everyone to run for their lives. Prince Alex's forces are moving with terrifying speed, much to the shock of the Imperial soldiers. One of them can't believe it, questioning why the Algiers prince would be on the front lines himself. But there he is, the Silver Lion, leading the charge with an unnerving calm. His subordinate spots the Imperial escort and suggests they go around, but Alex dismisses the idea. With a confident grin, he declares they will charge straight through them. The Algiers cavalry thunders forward, a wave of steel and fury. They easily cut off the escape route for Prince Muner's small escort. The cowardly prince and his commander can only stare in pure terror. Athos warns Gaia that at this rate, the prince's group will be completely isolated. Gaia makes a split-second decision, telling his uncle to lead their people to safety while he goes to buy them time, knowing this is a fight he can't possibly win. Athos begs him not to go, but Gaia insists he has to retrieve the prince's party. He knows that if Munar dies here, all their efforts will have been for nothing. Meanwhile, the cowardly prince screams at his men to form a protective wall around him. He grabs one of his subordinates, blaming him for this disastrous turn of events, but his tirade is cut short as his horse is struck down, sending him flying. Prince Alex rides through the chaos, his expression calm and focused. Gaia desperately cuts his way through the enemy soldiers, trying to reach the prince. Alex glances back, noticing the unfamiliar armor of the mercenaries. He then recalls the spy's report, realizing who these fighters must be. With a look of cold determination, he prepares to engage the new threat himself. Prince Munar can only scream in terror as the enemy closes in, but Gaia arrives just in time, blocking the Silver Lion's deadly strike. The sheer force of the blow sends a shockwave through his entire body. Prince Alex calmly identifies him as one of the northern mercenaries he'd heard about. Gaia screams at the stunned Imperial soldiers to get moving and regroup. He knows he can't hold off a commander of this caliber for very long. The prince's blade is too fast, slicing deep into Gaia's shoulder. He grits his teeth against the searing pain of the fresh wound, but he manages to parry the next attack, desperately holding his ground. He realizes that at this rate, he'll never be able to escape the fight alive. Prince Alex calmly points out that no matter how fast he heals, a fatal blow is still final. A cold glint in his eye shows he's more than willing to test that theory. Gaia is stunned as the prince suddenly makes his move. But instead of an attack, a massive explosion of energy erupts between them, catching the cowardly Prince Munar and his commander completely off guard. Gaia shouts at them to take this chance and run for their lives. But Jessica suddenly appears, scolding him for his reckless solo charge. Her face is a mask of disbelief at his foolish bravery. Rosso cuts in, telling them to save the argument for later. He effortlessly grabs the terrified Prince Munar, asking Gaia if this is the package they're supposed to deliver. Prince Alex's soldiers cry out his name in alarm. They beg him to fall back, but he just brushes off their concerns. Jessica unleashes another blast of magic to cover their escape. The dark energy slams into the Algias soldiers, buying them a precious few seconds. Rosso tells Gaia that this is their only chance to get away. Gaia can only stare, the gravity of their situation finally sinking in. Across the battlefield, Prince Alex watches their retreat with a cold, calculating gaze. And our boy finally understands just who he's up against. Jessica shouts at him to snap out of it and get moving. But as his subordinate asks to give chase, Alex calmly tells him to let them go. His subordinate warns him not to pursue, fearing the power of the elven mages. But Prince Alex just orders his men to reform their ranks and continue the advance. The subordinate pleads with him to fall back, worried for his prince's safety. Alex, however, is focused on the Imperial army and their northern mercenaries. He recalls the spy's report on the so-called Barbarian forces he now faces. Meanwhile, Gaia and his allies have successfully escaped into the nearby forest. He immediately pulls up his divine tablet to get a lay of the land. The map reveals a terrifying truth. They are completely surrounded by Algias army units. He lets out a panicked laugh, realizing they would have walked right into an ambush without it. And it dawns on him that the spy, Kalanus, had predicted their escape through the forest all along. He can't believe how thorough the enemy is, anticipating even their small group's movements. The sheer impossibility of their situation finally hits him. He stands up, his attention drawn to the commotion nearby. The portly commander is throwing a tantrum, furious that he has to walk through the forest. His subordinate tries to explain the obvious, but the prince just whines in despair. Munar gets in the man's face, demanding to be carried on his back like a child. Gaia and the mustached warrior can only watch the pathetic display unfold. The warrior suggests they make camp for the night, and Gaia can only agree with a weary smile. The retreat from Corin Castle was a disaster for the Empire, a crushing defeat that cost them half their army. But the small group they managed to save, including the prince and his entourage, were all from powerful imperial families. The subordinate officer explains that this outcome isn't necessarily a bad thing. Gaia agrees, realizing this gives his mercenaries a massive favor to sell back to the Empire. The mustached warrior is thrilled, agreeing they should make the Empire pay dearly for this rescue. But the subordinate officer approaches them again, asking for a moment of Gaia's time. Gaia turns, sarcastically asking what the incompetent one could possibly want now. The officer explains that he needs their help improving the quality of their meals. The reason for this strange request is, of course, Prince Munar. The prince is throwing a fit, complaining about the dry rations and demanding sweets and wine. Gaia can only massage his temples, completely fed up with the prince's childish behavior. He tries to explain that they're fugitives, and if they're discovered, they'll have nowhere left to run. Gaia tries to explain that their provisions are for soldiers, not for providing luxury meals. But the officer reminds him that the prince is not a man who can be reasoned with. Our boy can only puff his cheeks in silent mounting frustration. He finally suggests giving the prince the oranges and watermelons they have to placate him. The officer then pushes his luck, asking if they can also provide some warm soup. With a look of pure exhaustion, Gaia reluctantly agrees to see what he can do. But the prince continues his tantrum, declaring their food is unfit for a person of his station. Gaia turns to his uncle, completely drained by the entire ordeal. While Athos grins at the thought of the reward they'll demand, Gaia just looks horrified. And so, the small, dysfunctional group continues its long journey through the forest. The Imperial soldiers bicker amongst themselves, their morale clearly frayed from the long retreat. Gaia continues to lead them through the treacherous mountain paths, their long and difficult journey finally nearing its end. After days of travel, they finally emerge from the forest, relieved to be back on a main road. In the distance, they spot the town of Puros, a welcome sight of civilization. The sight of Imperial banners confirms that they've reached friendly territory. The subordinate officer is overcome with tearful relief, realizing the town is still safe. They make their way to the local command post to report the prince's safe return. A stern-looking commander greets them, acknowledging the fierce battle they survived at Karan Castle. But Prince Munar is already back to his old habits, complaining about his terrible ordeal over a glass of wine. He whines that he was promised an easy victory, but his soldiers proved to be completely useless. He then turns his anger on General Hibideus, accusing him of sending incompetent men. The general can only stand there, stoically denying the prince's baseless claims. The subordinate officer, however, seems to enjoy watching the general squirm. Hibideus laments the humiliation of having to fight alongside the barbarians. But the officer points out that those very mercenaries were the ones who saved the prince's life. Munar, however, is far more concerned with the lack of fine food during his escape. He throws another tantrum, demanding Hibideus give him a proper reception to soothe his frayed nerves. The general can only bow his head in weary acceptance, promising to do his best. And with that, the prince and his party quickly depart for the capital aboard an imperial ship. With the prince gone, Athos complains about how annoying the whole ordeal was. Rosso reminds them that Gaia and Athos still have to negotiate their reward with the Empire. The Lizard Man chief seems to sweat at the thought of more political maneuvering, but Gaia just smiles, deciding he'll worry about the details once they reach the capital. Just then, a man calls out to them from the docks. He approaches the group, asking if they're the ones scheduled to board the ship. Gaia confirms that they are, wondering what this is all about. The man smiles, offering them a chance to earn a little extra money during the voyage. Our boy is taken aback by the unexpected job offer. Aboard the ship, the man explains that the vessel they were on 3 days ago has already left, and the crew has been completely replaced. He explains that since they're short-handed, they need the passengers to help out. The mustached warrior smiles, figuring it's only natural for passengers to lend a hand. Jessica and Rosso agree to help, seeing no issue with carrying a few things. Rosso is mostly just excited about the promise of a lavish meal as a reward. Gaia watches them go, wondering if the food on their long march was really that bad. The man then directs them to take the rowers' provisions down into the ship's hold. Jessica notes the large number of rowers, and Gaia realizes this must be a galley ship. The man explains that the rowers on the Imperial warship were all volunteers, drawn by the good pay. But since this is a chartered merchant vessel, Gaia understands the crew is just hired labor. He and Jessica follow the man down a narrow staircase into the lower decks. But as they descend, Jessica notices a strange smell, her expression turning to one of confusion. They continue down the stairs into the ship's hold, where they find rows of exhausted men chained to their oars. Ropes are tied tightly around their necks, and their ankles are bound, revealing the grim truth of their situation. Gaia stares in shock, wondering who these people are. The man calmly explains that these are slaves, purchased to power the merchant vessel. The word slaves echoes in his mind, a horrifying realization. One of the guards snaps at him, telling him to stop dawdling and get to work. Just then, a young boy with blonde hair approaches, asking if Gaia is one of the barbarians he's heard about. A weary slave recognizes Gaia's accent, identifying him as part of the Bulmunt tribe. The slave's eyes widen in recognition as he calls out Athos's name. Gaia looks back at his uncle, asking if he knows this person, but Athos seems hesitant to answer. his expression unreadable. The man explains that they fought alongside each other for the Empire, revealing he's a barbarian too. Athos finally remembers him, asking if Gaia's father Noel is still well. But their reunion is cut short by an angry guard telling them to be quiet. The guard then strikes the man across the face for speaking out of turn. The slave cries out, the rope around his neck tightening from the force of the blow. Gaia and his uncle can only watch in stunned silence at the casual cruelty. The guard continues his assault, telling the man he has no permission to speak. He raises his weapon again, declaring that a slave doesn't even have the right to breathe. But Gaia steps in, grabbing the guard's arm and telling him to stop. The man shoves him back with a grunt, telling him to shut his mouth. Athos can only cry out his nephew's name in alarm. The guard scoffs, asking if they're barbarians too, and declaring he can do whatever he wants with his property. He raises his weapon once more, ready to continue the punishment. But a cold, murderous rage fills Gaia's eyes as he considers his next move. Before he can act, Athos grabs him from behind, desperately telling him to stop. Gaia looks back at his uncle, who silently pleads with him to let it go. Jessica and Athos hold him back as he stares, the fire in his eyes slowly fading. His uncle quickly apologizes to the guard, explaining that the boy was just startled by the reunion. He discreetly offers the man a few silver coins as a gesture of peace. The guard's angry expression softens into one of surprise. He takes the bribe, suggesting that if Athos is so concerned, he can pay for the other slave's care. The guard smirks, casually remarking that he still has a job to do. Athos can only look on with a pained expression, forced to endure the humiliation. He pleads with the man to accept the payment, hoping to end the confrontation. The guard pockets the money, explaining that damaging the ship's property isn't worth the trouble. With the situation diffused, Athos pulls his stunned nephew away from the hold. Gaia is still reeling from the brutal display of power he just witnessed. Below deck, the beaten slave can only sit in defeated silence. Back on deck, Rosso's voice cuts through the tension, acknowledging Gaia's earlier rage. He explains that even he knows it would be foolish to kill an Imperial on their own ship. Gaia can only apologize, ashamed of his own powerlessness. But Rosso just tells him not to worry, admitting he might have lost his temper first. The boy remains troubled, unable to shake the image from his mind. He finally turns to the one person who might have an answer, calling out to his uncle. He asks Athos why they couldn't do more to help the barbarian slave. His uncle looks back with a pained expression, ready to explain a harsh reality. Athos turns to his nephew, telling him not to get any foolish ideas. But Gaia insists he just wants to negotiate the man's freedom, since he's just property. His uncle looks out at the sea, explaining that the man became the Empire's property when their tribe lost the war. He reveals that many of their people were sold under Imperial rule, and this ship is full of them. He questions how they could ever afford to buy them all back when they can barely support themselves. Once someone becomes a slave, he explains, there is simply nothing that can be done. He tells Gaia that as their chief, he must learn to accept this harsh reality. Nearby, Jessica clenches her fist, silently fuming at the injustice. But Gaia can't accept it, questioning how his uncle can say there's nothing to be done. The words hang in the air, a bitter pill he refuses to swallow. They soon arrive at their destination, the imperial capital, Galleria. A bustling city known as Vetratolis, the very heart of the Empire's culture. Its streets are filled with a life far removed from the battlefields they just left. A place where all roads are said to eventually lead. And deep within the palace, a report is being delivered to Emperor Gordius III. General Hibadius announces their victory on the Puros Plain and the capture of key territories. The subordinate officer adds that thanks to the barbarian mercenaries, Prince Muner was safely evacuated. They dedicate this hard-won victory to their emperor, who listens from his throne. The emperor's expression is weary as he acknowledges their efforts. But in the court, some of the nobles scoff, wondering why the word barbarian is being spoken in such a place. One of the nobles dismisses them, remarking that soldiers simply don't understand the ways of the court. Gaia can only listen, understanding the clear divide between their worlds. But another official steps forward, formally congratulating Gaia and Athos on their recent success. He introduces himself as Hermann, the man in charge of determining their reward for their service. Gaia is completely taken aback by the man's polite and respectful demeanor. He can't help but think how unusually humble this man is for an Imperial. Hermann gestures to the scrolls on his desk, ready to get down to business. He begins to read, listing their two major contributions, turning the tide at Puros Plain and saving the prince at Koron Castle. Gaia's eyes widen, knowing this is the moment he's been waiting for. He silently thanks the subordinate officer, relieved that the man kept his word and reported their deeds accurately. Gaia can't help but remember the prince's childish tantrums during their long march. Herman asks what they would like as a reward, and Athos wonders just how much they can ask for. The official explains that the emperor is so pleased, he's willing to be extremely generous. Seizing the opportunity, Athos begins to speak. He asks for a complete and total tax exemption for the barbarian tribes. Herman considers the bold request without a word. Gaia knows that while money would be nice, this is a far more valuable prize. But Herman explains that taxes are how the empire keeps track of its territories. He understands their logic, but notes that a complete exemption is a bit extreme. He agrees to their request in principle, but clarifies that a permanent exemption is out of the question. Instead, he suggests they agree on a specific time period for the tax break. He proposes a 5-year exemption, much to Athos's complete shock. Athos argues that 5 years is far too little for saving the prince's life. So Gaia steps in, boldly demanding a 30-year exemption instead. Herman counters that their lands are undervalued, listing their resources from his records. But Gaia points out that their population has dwindled, making the old tax rates impossible to pay. He watches the official, waiting to see if his argument landed. The official seems genuinely surprised, admitting he expected a much less civil negotiation. Gaia realizes this is because every other imperial he's met has been a complete monster. He remembers his uncle's advice to be prepared for anything, even a reasonable discussion. Athos argues that their people are suffering, but Herman seems unmoved by the plea. But Gaia realizes that a simple emotional appeal will have no effect on this man. He decides to consult his divine tablet, looking for a different angle. The tablet reveals that Herman himself is of barbarian descent, a brilliant man who rose through the ranks. Our boy is stunned, wondering why such a capable person is stuck in a mid-level position. After a moment of thought, Herman makes his final offer, a 15-year tax exemption for their lands. He explains that he will submit the proposal and asks them to remain in the capital for a while. Both Gaia and his uncle are overjoyed, thanking the official for his generosity. Gaia celebrates their victory, thrilled that they actually pulled it off. But in his mind, he knows that 15 years is more than enough time to quietly build their strength, right under the empire's nose. A plan to rebuild his people and one day gain the strength to oppose the empire. Athos is overcome with gratitude, thanking Herman for his incredible generosity. But the official simply smiles, stating it's a fair reward for their service. Their meeting is suddenly interrupted by another man rushing into the room. He explains that Prince Munor is demanding immediate payment for his stay in Puros. Herman's expression hardens, realizing the prince's spending habits are causing a financial strain. He apologizes for the interruption, telling Gaia and Athos to make themselves comfortable. Athos then politely asks about Prince Munor's well-being. The official panics, exclaiming that the prince is far from well, because Munor is already back to his old habits, spending lavishly on parties and draining the military's budget. The man explains that many were captured at Coron Castle, and they'll need a lot of money for the ransom. Athos can only listen, realizing the Empire's troubles are far from over. But Herman's thoughts drift to the Emperor, noting his fondness for drink. He reveals that the Emperor has been drinking more lately, his health clearly suffering. It's a source of great concern for those who serve him. Gaia and Athos listen in, getting a rare glimpse into the court's private worries. The subordinate is quickly silenced for speaking so freely. Herman apologizes for the strange tangent, though he admits it was an interesting topic. He then dismisses them, promising to be in touch once the deal is finalized. Outside, Gaia and his uncle reflect on the negotiation, impressed by Herman's skill. Athos celebrates their 15-year victory, though he feels they could have gotten even more from Herman. Gaia wonders aloud why a man as capable as Herman isn't in a higher position. His uncle explains that most high-ranking officials come from powerful noble families. Gaia recalls Prince Munor's cronies, realizing that in the Empire, ability and status rarely match. He concludes that Herman's barbarian heritage must be the reason his career has stalled. Athos agrees, lamenting the Empire's foolishness in wasting such a valuable talent. Our boy realizes that even in this new world, nepotism is a problem that holds people back. As they walk through the capital, they see the bustling life of the city all around them. The grand architecture stands as a testament to the Empire's long history and power. And Gaia understands that despite its corruption, the Empire grew strong on the backs of countless brilliant people. Athos remarks that the Empire's sheer depth of talent is what makes it so formidable, but Gaia can only think that their opponent is simply too massive to take on. For now, they explore the capital, a city teeming with life. They soon find a small eatery, where a man announces the evening's meal. On the menu tonight is a simple but hearty chicken and onion soup. The cheerful owner takes their order, happy to serve the new customers. Inside, Rosso calls out to Gaia, telling him to join the rest of the group. He's already saved a seat for Jessica, inviting her to eat with him. The Lizard Man chief digs in, immediately impressed by the simple meal. Even Jessica has to admit that the food in the imperial capital is surprisingly delicious. She wonders what makes this simple soup taste so different from what she's used to. Gaia explains that it's the salt and pepper, rare commodities for their people. But in the Empire, such spices are common enough for everyone to enjoy. Rosso then changes the subject, asking Jessica about the medicine he requested. Gaia realizes they must be running low, since the lizardmen suffered so many injuries. One of the injured lizardmen tells them not to worry, insisting they just need rest to recover. Rosso just laughs, admitting that their reckless nature is why so many of them get hurt. Jessica agrees to give them what she's already prepared from her own supplies. But she warns that her own ingredients are starting to run dangerously low. Elsewhere, 2 other elves discover that the ingredients they need are sold at exorbitant prices in the capital. Rosso gets an idea, suggesting they all go gather herbs in the forest outside the capital. Jessica questions if he even knows what to look for, and Rosso cheerfully asks her to teach him. She explains that identifying herbs is a dangerous business, not something you learn overnight. A knowing smile crosses Gaia's face as he points out that the local animals are likely domesticated. Jessica asks what he's smirking about, but our boy just plays it off with a laugh. Rosso seems pleased with their new alliance, much to Jessica's complete confusion. The Lizardman chief then asks Gaia what he and his uncle were up to all day. Gaia explains that they were visiting the home of a certain nobleman. He holds up a heavy pouch, a clear sign of their success, and reveals a massive pile of silver coins, explaining that they were collecting their payment. Both Jessica and Rosso can only stare in disbelief at the sheer amount of money. Gaia just smiles, asking if they're impressed by the massive haul. He explains that since they saved not just the prince but many other nobles, he intends to collect every single coin they are owed for their trouble. He holds the payment with a look of quiet satisfaction. He remembers the imperial officer's disdainful expression as he handed over the money. The memory of being looked down on as a barbarian still fuels his quiet rage. Jessica and Rosso agree that the reward was worth the trouble of babysitting the prince, but Gaia tells them not to be satisfied with just this. He declares that this isn't the end, as this payment isn't even half of what's needed to help the noble families they rescued. Jessica and Rosso are stunned, questioning how there could possibly be more. Jessica agrees they'll need to think carefully about how to spend such a large sum, but Gaia looks up with a serious expression, confirming that he already has a plan in mind. He looks down at the pile of silver, his mind already working on their next move. Later, he gathers the leaders of the other barbarian tribes. Representatives from the Anglo and Vandal tribes are all in attendance. Even the elves and lizardmen have joined this important council. Gaia and the mustached warrior sit before them, ready to begin the meeting of the barbarian chiefs. The warrior explains that after deducting their expenses, they have a substantial amount of money left over from the rewards they collected. He pours out the contents of the bag, revealing a mountain of silver coins. The other tribe leaders can only stare in stunned disbelief at the sheer size of their reward. The mustached warrior explains that if they were to follow tradition, they would simply divide the money among the tribes. But he announces that their young chief Gaia has a different proposal for how to use it. One of the other leaders immediately objects, demanding to know what Gaia intends to do with their share. He argues that with a reward this large, they should just take the money and not listen to some kid's plan. Another warrior quickly tells him to be quiet and show their chief some respect. But the argument continues, with another leader pointing out that each tribe has its own interest to look after. Gaia leans forward, insisting that his proposal is simple and will benefit every single one of them. He then reveals his audacious plan, to use every last coin to buy back their comrades who were sold into slavery. The other leaders are stunned, questioning his plan to buy back the slaves. The mustached warrior listens intently, his expression unreadable. The room erupts in argument, with some insisting that once someone is a slave, they're a slave for life. But one of the elf leaders raises a hand, silencing the room. He asks if it's even possible to buy back a slave in the first place, and he questions if this plan only applies to Gaia's own Bulmant tribe. Gaia calmly explains that it is possible, as long as they pay the slave traders their price. He then clarifies that this isn't just for his tribe, but for all barbarians, a proposal for their collective benefit. The elf leader seems to understand, his expression softening with this new information. But the other tribe leaders still look uncertain, weighing the heavy decision before them. One of the elder chiefs listens with a grim, unreadable expression. Gaia questions their hesitation, wondering why the reaction is so cold. Even Athos seems conflicted, lamenting that this is their only chance to save their people. But then he looks up, his voice firm as he declares that he is against the plan. Gaia is completely stunned by his uncle's sudden opposition. He demands to know why Athos, of all people, would stand in his way. Athos explains that while the sentiment is noble, the money must be used to rebuild their tribe, not to attract the Empire's suspicion. But Gaia fires back, insisting that bringing their people home is the only way to truly rebuild. The other leaders argue that this is just a transaction, a way to reclaim their own under the Empire's rules. Athos listens to their arguments, but his own resolve seems unshaken. He calls it an empty theory, insisting this pile of silver won't be enough to save them all. He warns that the Empire's officials are not fools and will notice such a dangerous move. Gaia tries to argue, but his uncle's words cut him off. Another leader agrees, admitting it would be foolish to risk the Empire's wrath. The other leaders agree, deciding it's better to take the money and forget the unlucky ones. The words "can't be helped" echo in his mind as he listens to their selfish logic. The mustached warrior places a comforting hand on his shoulder. Athos tells him to forget the slaves and use the money to buy land and supplies for their village. A bitter smile forms on Gaia's face as he clenches his jaw in frustration. But he looks up, his eyes filled with a cold and unwavering resolve. He shouts back that he absolutely refuses to accept this. He insists that even his uncle must be pained by this injustice, and that they can't just let it stand. He clenches his fist, admitting that they're only giving up because they're too weak to oppose the Empire. But one of the other tribe leaders tells the young chief to stop his pointless shouting. He demands they just hand over the money, arguing that what happened to the slaves can't be helped. He coldly tells them to just consider their enslaved comrades already dead. The cruel words hang in the air, stunning both Gaia and his uncle. Gaia fires back that calling them dead is going too far, reminding the man that they are all barbarians. But the chief just scoffs, refusing to waste money on fools who were clumsy enough to get captured. The insult hits Gaia hard, leaving him seething with a renewed sense of fury. Jessica points out that women and children were among those taken by the Empire. But the chief insists that it can't be helped, arguing that angering the Empire is foolish. Gaia grits his teeth, refusing to accept their cowardly reasoning. He explodes with rage, accusing the man of abandoning his own people just to appease their masters. The chief's expression hardens, his patience finally worn thin by the boy's defiance. He delivers a vicious kick, sending Gaia sprawling to the ground. The man stands over him, shouting that if Gaia wants to talk, he should do it with his fists. Gaia clutches his chest, the force of the blow knocking the wind out of him. But he glares back with pure defiance, accepting the man's brutal challenge. The chief grabs him by the collar, ready to beat some sense into the young upstart. The other warriors clear a space, eagerly encouraging the fight to begin. The chief easily overpowers Gaia, pinning him to the ground. He tightens his grip around the boy's throat, cutting off his air. The man raises a fist, ready to deliver a punishing blow. He mocks Gaia's naive ideals, telling him that being chief doesn't mean he can do whatever he wants. Though beaten and bloodied, Gaia's eyes still burn with defiance. With a sudden burst of energy, he slams his forehead into the chief's face. The man cries out, stunned by the unexpected counterattack. Gaia seizes the opportunity, grabbing the man's arm to break his hold. He uses his opponent's momentum to flip him over, shouting that the chief is the real coward. The chief is sent flying, completely overpowered by the boy's sudden move. Gaia stands over him, bruised and bloodied, but refusing to back down. He shouts that he's sick of hearing them say that it can't be helped. He reminds them all of the barbarian slaves they saw on the galley ship. He asks how they can truly believe there's nothing to be done after seeing that. The other tribe leaders are stunned into silence by his impassioned plea. But the defeated chief just scoffs, dismissing his words as naive idealism. He reminds them of the Empire's overwhelming power, calling it foolish to provoke them. But Gaia looks back with defiance, recalling his father, Noel, who rebelled against that very power. He explains that his father fought not because he was a fool, but because he chose freedom over submission. He asks if losing the war and their people means they've lost their hearts as well. The other leaders can only stare back, one of them questioning his words. But Gaia clutches his chest, declaring that he will carry on his father's will. He shouts that he will bring their people back, regardless of what the Empire thinks, because he would rather die a proud wolf than live as a beaten dog, and if they won't help, he'll do it alone. He turns his back on them all, telling the cowards to go home. The insult hangs in the air, stunning the other chiefs into silence. But the man who fought him rises, shouting that no one is happy to serve the Empire, and that of course they want their people back. Gaia looks back, a flicker of understanding in his bruised expression. He stands before them all, declaring that the pride of their people is not yet broken, and they will not be crushed by the Empire. He raises a fist, vowing to bring every last one of their comrades home. And in that moment, his words ignite a fire in them all, their voices rising in a single unified roar. Jessica can't help but smile, impressed by the boy's sudden display of leadership. The mustached warrior looks on, his heart swelling with pride for their new chief. Even the chief who fought him seems to have been won over, his defiance replaced with a newfound respect. Later, with their new alliance forged, it's time to tend to the wounds from the fight. Gaia looks down at his shoulder, noticing the large, dark bruise left by the chief's attack. Jessica quickly steps in to treat the injury, telling him to hold still, but he just waves her off with a grin, insisting that it's already healing and she shouldn't waste her medicine. She just gives him a deadpan stare, completely unimpressed by his excuses. She ignores his protests, dabbing at his bruised face while he complains that it hurts. Jessica explains that she and the other elves gathered plenty of herbs, so they won't be running out of medicine anytime soon. Gaia can only offer a sheepish thanks for her concern. After a moment of silence, she looks over at him. She asks when he first came up with the plan to buy back their people. He admits that while he's always hated the idea of slavery, the sight of the galley ship solidified his resolve. He knows this feeling is rooted in the ethics of his past life, a concept he can't easily explain. So he just simplifies it, saying it's just wrong to see his comrades treated like tools. Jessica can only stare back, remarking that he's a very strange person. But the chief who fought him overhears, realizing that while many feel the same way, most would have given up long ago. Gaia sheepishly admits he provoked the chief on purpose, hoping to get a rise out of him. Jessica confesses that she lacked the courage to say the things he did, but she smiles, admitting that watching him stand up for them was incredibly satisfying. She reveals that she and Rosso had already decided to support his plan, and with a determined look, she tells him to keep fighting for their people. Gaia can only smile back, grateful for her unwavering support. Later that night, the celebration continues, but not everyone is in a festive mood. The defeated chief complains to Athos about Gaia's reckless behavior, but Athos just laughs, proudly declaring that the boy is his pride and joy, much to the other man's annoyance. The chief pours a drink, admitting he respects Athos's skill but not the kid's. He reminds Athos that he was also against the boy's plan, questioning his sudden change of heart. But Athos just laughs, declaring he would never betray Gaia, as his life's purpose is to make the boy a great chief. His expression sobers as he explains this is a promise he made to his late brother. The chief's gaze softens at the mention of Noel's name. He remembers his own brother, a brave warrior who took responsibility for his actions by covering his comrades' retreat. A younger Athos had begged him to run, asking who would lead their people if he fell. But Noel just smiled through the pain, reminding him that Gaia was still there. The chief looks back at Athos, a new understanding dawning in his eyes. He remembers Noel's final moments, entrusting his son's future to his brother's care. The chief who fought him just scoffs, calling the whole situation ridiculous. But Athos explains that you can't be bound by the words of the dead, admitting he once felt the same way. He reflects that after their defeat, Gaia changed, becoming more thoughtful than ever before. The boy began to think beyond just fighting, looking for a way for their people to prosper with a vision far greater than his own. He believes Gaia will accomplish things that he and his brother never could. The mustached warrior agrees, declaring that he has faith in their new chief and will follow him anywhere. The other chief is stunned, questioning if they truly believe Gaia can defeat the Empire. The mustached warrior gives a simple, unwavering confirmation. The chief slams his cup down, calling the very idea absurd. He stumbles away, declaring he doesn't believe it and needs a drink to clear his head, while Gaia just watches him go. The mustached warrior just laughs, agreeing with the chief's assessment. He then tells the man that in time, he too will come to believe in Gaia. Back in their village, the new alliance is already proving fruitful. Gaia reflects on how they can now hunt the once invincible bloody bear, all thanks to the superior iron weapons they were able to purchase from the Empire. Jessica and Rosso seem to be in complete agreement with this new direction. One of the lizardmen asks if they'll continue the hunt, and Gaia confirms that they will. He explains that with the other tribes helping, they should gather as much as they can, because every tribe will need to be well-stocked for the coming winter. And with the money they collected from the nobles, they finally bought back their people from slavery. But even with their combined efforts, they couldn't buy back every single person who was taken. The massive reward they'd earned was completely wiped out in the process. Gaia looks on, knowing that financially, this was a complete loss. But seeing his people reunited with their families was a reward worth more than any amount of silver. He watches them, knowing he has absolutely no regrets. But their problems are far from over, as Jessica points out that with winter approaching, their hunting season is coming to an end. and with so many new mouths to feed, their food supplies are already stretched dangerously thin. The weight of this new responsibility settles heavily on Gaia's shoulders. The returned villagers need everything from food and clothing to proper shelter. He realizes that to survive the coming winter, they'll need to purchase far more supplies than ever before. Rosso suggests they could just hunt more bears for money, but Jessica knows that's not a sustainable plan. He then recalls Gaia mentioning another valuable resource they could find nearby. Jessica's eyes widen as she remembers the same thing, wondering if it was actually true. The resource in question was the massive deposit of rock salt they'd discovered, and Gaia confirms with a sly grin that it is indeed very real. With the information from his tablet, they were able to begin mining the salt with their current technology. Jessica is overjoyed, realizing they'll no longer have to buy expensive salt from merchants. She scolds Rosso for not understanding its value, explaining how carefully she has to ration her own spices. The thought of richer soup is enough to get them both excited, as Gaia watches with a smile. He knows that securing a supply of salt is a huge step forward, but his expression shows their troubles are far from over. The villagers greet Athos's party, asking if their trip to the imperial town was a success. But his uncle looks defeated, admitting they were forced to sell their goods for a pittance. Gaia, Jessica, and Rosso can only watch the disappointing outcome. The goods in question were the valuable pelts of the bloody bear. But Gaia just smirks, knowing a pelt that tough and warm should never be sold so cheaply. He understands this is another one of their tribe's biggest problems. They have no proper way to sell their goods. While they've traded in the past, it's always been on a very small scale. Their experience is limited, and with no established market, they're at the mercy of the merchants. But his expression hardens as he realizes their true focus should be on the salt. Unlike other goods, rock salt has a stable value and is always in demand, making it the perfect commodity. He understands that the merchants' power to protect their interests is far stronger than his tribe's. If their lack of a proper trade route is discovered, they'll be exploited and taken advantage of. And in the worst-case scenario, the Empire could use the discovery of their salt mine as a pretext for a full-scale invasion. After buying back so many of their people, the last thing they want is to attract more imperial attention. But unlike other goods, salt doesn't spoil, making it a truly valuable and stable asset. Gaia consults his tablet, realizing they haven't explored beyond the Bloody Bear's territory and wondering why no one ever goes there. His map reveals a strange icon in the unexplored region, making him wonder what kind of creature could be living there.